Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video I will be painting a bald eagle using gouache. In this video I will be sharing a masking technique that I figured out using contact paper. So what you haven't seen is that I sketched this bald eagle on a piece of vellum, and a piece of contact paper was overlaid over the top of that and cut out by my assistant. And that video should be coming up soon. There's two reasons why I use vellum, and one of the reasons is that when I'm sketching on vellum, it's pretty cheap and it helps me get all of my mistakes out when I am sketching. So I can erase on the vellum and I don't have to worry about damaging the paper too much when I'm working on it. And the other reason is when I'm using this carbon transfer technique, I can line up the vellum exactly how I want it on the piece of paper, so I don't have to go back and erase it continually because I don't like the way that the sketch is on the paper, and I can get the composition just right. So as you can see, my assistant is cutting out this mask, and he's a much better cutter than I am. That's one of the few artwork pieces that I can't really do. I was always the worst at cutting out snowflakes, let's just say that. And he'll be finishing up rather shortly. So what I'm about to show you is the final piece of contact paper. So I'm going to be putting this exactly over where I put my carbon transfer sketch. And you also might notice that I have everything taped down so that when I start using wet media, it's not going to warp too badly. It actually took a while to get the vellum off of the contact paper, so in the future I might use something else as the backing. I might do the carbon transfer paper onto a piece of printer paper and see how that works. Here I am overlaying the contact paper over the top of my nice watercolor paper. You actually might notice that some of the sketch ended up on the carbon transfer paper, or onto the contact paper. And I try to smooth it out as much as possible to get all the bubbles out. So next part of this painting is creating the background. I'm using a mixture of ultramarine blue and sap green. And the reason for the background is that I didn't want to paint the eagle on plain white because I would have to make it a lot darker than what it was in the picture, and I wanted that nice green color. And so I'm removing the contact paper. I haven't done this before, and so this was really interesting to see, and it produced really clean lines. But I was still really tentative about it, and so I was going very slowly just to make sure that I didn't tear any of the watercolor paper. And thanks to the carbon transfer technique, the sketch is still intact, so I didn't have to worry about that getting attached to the contact paper. And then I waited for it to dry. Now we're starting to work on the eagle, and I'm mixing up all of my yellow colors down at the bottom, and I usually like to start with the beak first. So I'm mixing a primary yellow with a permanent yellow deep and a yellow ochre, and trying to lay down those initial mid-tone values. I'm also mixing some yellow ochre and burnt sienna together with a little bit of titanium white to give the eagle its fleshy color. Here I'm mixing ultramarine blue and burnt sienna together to create a warm gray. I'm starting to work on the light shadows, and I keep a piece of tissue paper on me at all times just to mop up any of the extra wetness. I've also added a little bit of matte medium to this paint as well, to prevent it from lifting up when I add the new layers. I try to set up a gradient of different values to work from. So I mix it in from dark to lightest and pull from the areas that I need. After laying in the light shadows, I put in some of slightly darker shadows, and I mix up a little bit of color for the base of the eye. Eagle eyes are kind of goldish green in color. The next part, I start adding a lot of the darker values. I actually go with some of the darkest values, and I'm using that ultramarine and burnt sienna mixture to create all of the blacks in this image. It gives the blacks a little bit more character. So you can see me, I outlined the eye, I added a little bit of that darker color to the mouth. I'm going around the eye a little bit with some of the darker gray colors, and then I'm mixing in areas for the iris and for the pupil. Now with some of the darker shadows, I'm adding some details. So you can see slightly darker warm grays in areas where there would be warm grays. And I'm continuing to outline parts that need outlined. In this part, I'm mixing in a little bit more blue, so I'm shifting the ratio of the burnt sienna to the ultramarine towards the ultramarine, and those give really nice deep darker shadows, so that'll push those areas back. And then I'm adding some more lighter shadows, mixing in a little bit more of the yellow ochre in to make those shadows a little bit warmer, to make them come forward. So now I'm going to start working on the highlights. I've laid out some titanium white, some ultramarine on one side, and some yellow ochre and more titanium white on the other side. And in the middle is Pierrot red, and that's going to be used for some parts around the mouth and around his wrinkles and his flesh. So here I'm adding some of the warmer highlights from the yellow ochre and the titanium white mixture. And I'm starting to add highlights to the really fine feathers around his face. And with this, I also wanted to have a gradient as well. So almost pure yellow ochre to almost pure titanium white. Here are the cooler highlights, and I put these pretty much all around the head, and those will be lighter than all the grays, but it'll push those parts back. I will also go over the top of these with more of the yellow ochre and titanium white mixture, so that it gives the illusion that I'm slowly building up layers of feathers to give it more of a three-dimensional look. I'm also adding some blue and some purple as highlights for around the eyes. As some of you may know, highlights and whatnot aren't pure white. So here I go with some of that lighter yellow ochre mixture. And I'm just putting that over the top of the cooler shadows, or the cooler highlights, just to make those parts come forward a little bit more. And now I'm reapplying some warmer grays, and I have the blue mixed with the yellow ochre and more titanium white. And then also around his mouth, I mixed a dark purple using the Peril red and the blue and a little bit of the yellow ochre. I also applied that underneath some of his wrinkles. I'm adding a few more details to the eye. He has some really interesting eyes. There, see there's the wrinkles. And then I'm gonna add some more details to the beak pretty soon. These are just some cooler highlights over the top of the wrinkles. And a few more detailed feathers. And then this is the part where I'm adding like the finest details. So the white I'm using is almost pure white, and I'm adding some of his finer feathers around the lips and the beak. And now I'm peeling off the tape. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like to see more in the future, please send us a like or leave a comment. I really enjoyed painting this bald eagle, and I hope to see you next time.